You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your website, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
The following message contains a special offer for listeners of this station. Are you a man over 40? Are you constantly looking for the nearest bathroom? Do you wake up multiple times a night to use the bathroom? Right now, Perfect Prostate is sending out free bottles of their groundbreaking new formula to listeners of this station. Perfect Prostate Formula was developed by medical doctor Mitchell Fleischer, and its ingredients have been clinically studied to reduce your frequent nighttime bathroom visits and promote healthy urine flow. Right now, preferred customers get their first bottle of Perfect Prostate absolutely free. There's nothing to lose. Perfect Prostate is guaranteed to reduce that constant urge to use the bathroom, especially at night, and promote healthy urine flow. Don't wait. Call now for your free bottle. Just pay shipping and processing. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251. Supplies are limited. One free bottle per household. Call now. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251.
Hey folks, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dr. Richard Harden. We are on the same mission, which is waking up America. We just have different paths. So stay tuned for some information on how you can keep up with Richard and all his work.
Visit Richard's website at raharden.com. That's the World Wide Web at RAHARDIN.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit Amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Harden to see and purchase his books.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps stand ready to defend the American way of life. The few, the proud, the Marines.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the Internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Conservative Commando's radio show. Anna Little hosting today with Sharon Engel. And John Forsyth, Silent John, is working the boards in the studio, and we are coming to you live from Conservative Commandos Radio Network Studios, WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. Those are all .coms. And you can listen to rebroadcasts of our shows on our website, CCRS Network or CCR Show. At noon, you can tune into RoarRadio.net, and at 11 p.m., HighPlainsDailyNews.com. And now, of course, you can listen to Conservative Commandos from any telephone by calling 832-999-1199. And it really is true, as producer Rick Trader says, we are everywhere. We are everywhere. But I'm co-hosting today with the one and only Sharon Engel from Nevada. Sharon, welcome to Conservative Commandos.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's great to be here on Fabulous Friday. I was here yesterday on a terrific Thursday with George Landreth, and now to be here once more. I'm wondering if our friends out there in Radio Land are getting tired of hearing my voice and thinking, oh, my gosh, do we have to
never
that woman one more time?
Never. We love you.
We'll try to make it a very interesting show today, and I know you have great guests lined up, and I'm excited to get to talk with them.
Yeah, well, me too. You know, we're going to be speaking first. I guess you have the first interview with...
That's true.
He's a Conservative Commandos relative. Tell us about him.
Well, his name is Vincent Vernuccio. If you're thinking about Frank Vernuccio, you're in the right quarter. Vincent Vernuccio is the director of labor policy at Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He's also a senior fellow at Illinois Policy Institute, and he is a graduate of Ave Maria School of Law in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Under President George Bush, he served as a special assistant to the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management in the Department of Labor. Vincent Vernuccio has published articles and op-eds in such newspapers and magazines as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Investors Business Daily, the Washington Times, National Review, Forbes, and the American Spectator. He's also been cited in several books, and he's a frequent contributor on national television and radio shows such as Your World with Neil Cavuto and Varney and Company. Vincent Vernuccio is sought-after voice on labor panels nationally in Washington, D.C., and is a regular guest on Fox News channels. And he has been described by Stuart Varney as a top union watchdog. He's advised senators and congressmen on a multitude of labor-related issues, and he's testified before the U.S. House of Representatives Subcommittee on Federal Workforce, Postal Service, and Labor Policy. And today we've asked him to come on and talk about workers' choice, or allowing unionized workers to opt out of union representation and represent themselves. Even under right to work, they can't currently do so. So this is one of those ongoing topics that we're now having, probably because President Trump really did raise the issue. He said the problem here in the U.S. is jobs and is our labor force, and it is what's going on at all levels, and not just government regulation, but on the other side of the aisle with the union bosses. These are things that keep us from working to the maximum here in this country, from really grabbing a hold of the American dream. And so we're going to be talking with Vincent Vernuccio about how do we seize that American dream now that we've got a president who's willing to at least look at the issue and say there is an American dream out there. And then, of course, the next guest at 4:05 is Dr. Bob McClure, who's the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute, which is a nonpartisan public policy research organization based in Florida. And Dr. McClure was appointed by Governor Jeb Bush to the Florida Elections Commission and has served on the state of Florida Education Strategic Planning Council. He's been published in both the state and national levels on numerous topics, including property rights, tax policy, health care, and education reform, lectured nationally on multiple policy issues, and quoted on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Bob served on the Florida Advisory Council of the National Center for Policy Analysis, and he was appointed to the Florida Committee for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and is a member of the editorial board for the Journal of School Choice. He's also served in the advisory capacity on the transition teams for both Governor Rick Scott and Attorney General Pam Bondi. Currently, he serves as on the Economic Advisory Council for Governor Scott, and he's also recently received the Governor's Business Ambassador Award for his dedication to promotion of free enterprise in Florida. And he is going to be discussing how conservatives interpret the recent election. So that will be interesting to see what Dr. Bob McClure's take is on the conservative interpretation, which leads me to think that there's an interpretation here that may not be grounded in fact, that maybe we have high expectations. And, of course, whenever you have expectations, you're setting yourself up for some kind of disappointment here. So we'll see what Dr. Bob McClure has to say about our expectations as conservative. And, of course, you have our last guest, Anna.
I do. He's kind of well known to the Conservative Commandos radio show, and as to yourself and of course to me. His name is Larry Sirignano. He's an attorney and a political consultant based in Arlington, Virginia. He presently represents the President-elect Donald Trump. in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, on the election recount. He serves as Virginia State Director at American Catholics for Religious Freedom, and he's been the D.C. representative at Choose Life License Plates and fundadoption.org. And he very cutely and in a humorous way says that if he's doing what he does well, you never know he did it. So he's an interesting character. He does have previous involvement with international projects such as Africa Life Youth Foundation and Operation Outcry, both of which are nonprofits. He's done election recounts all over the world, including several in the United States. For example, Scott Brown's state Senate run and countless others. And he often says, show me a fight and I'll get in it. So we're looking forward to speaking to Larry Sirignano. He was going to be reporting to us live from Kenosha County, Wisconsin, but he has now returned to Washington, D.C. just last night, announcing that the election results are complete in Wisconsin, although not quite certified yet on the recount, and that Donald Trump has won. So we're asking him to come on the show today to talk to us about these 2016 presidential election recounts. We need an update. We would like to know what the results have been and to recap the process and especially the cost of this. So, everybody expects that recounts, okay, that sounds fair, but if it's not possible for those recounts to produce any significant result, should we be spending taxpayer dollars on such a process when the likelihood is that that result is not going to change? And that's quite a debate, because there are groups that believe every vote should be counted no matter whether it affects the outcome, the end outcome or not. And so they think that it's worth it to spend this money. Other groups think that we need to be fiscally responsible and that we should only enter into recounts where we think we can affect a change in the results. So it'll be an interesting conversation.
Yes, I'm looking forward to our guests, as always. And I know that those that join us every day due to, I think that's the strength of the program, is that we bring experts who bring topics to light. But more than that, we arm people with knowledge so that they can fight for truth. And it's that vision or the knowledge that sets us free in this country. If we're all ignorant of what's going on, it's very difficult to fight for freedom.
That's right. That's right. And in speaking of fighting for freedom, we only have about a minute, but did you want to start to touch on what freedoms we might be able to look forward to with a change in administration?
Absolutely. Let's tease a bit here, because we're going to go to break, as you said, Anna. And I'll just tease with this. Those of us who want to repeal Obamacare may be in for a rude awakening. Even with the change of administration, we might not get what we're expecting. How's that?
That sounds like quite the tease. And listeners, you've got to stay tuned if you want to hear what Sharon means by that. And I'm going to take us straight into the break. I'm Anna Little, co-hosting today with Sharon Engel, and we are coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. Those are all .com. Sharon Engel and Anna Little will be right back with you at Conservative Commandos after this break.
I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote in mass to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
You are listening to Conservative Commandos radio show with yours truly, Sharon Angle, and Anna Little co-hosting today. If you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. Or at noon, you can log on to roarradio.net, and at 11 p.m., you can log on to highplainsdailynews.com. Now you can listen to Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. And you know, I've done that, Anna. I've listened to our show on my telephone, especially when I'm traveling. I just put it on speaker and let Rick and the co-host just roll through my car as I'm traveling. So it's a good way to get into the swing of what's going on in the world today. And speaking of what in the world is going on, let's talk about what in the world is going on with Obamacare. We had a guest on yesterday that was talking about Congressman Tom Price being appointed to Health and Human Services. And, of course, his mantra is repeal and replace Obamacare, which on the face of it sounds like just exactly what we've been arguing for over the last 8 years. Please repeal and replace this. But then I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, why do we have to replace it if in the next sentence Congressman Tom Price has said, let's just give it back to the states. The closer we can get health care back into the states, which is what we all want, is to dismantle those federal agencies like the EPA and education and everything else that has been putting rules and regulations on us ad infinitum for the last 8 years, and we're just sick and tired of it. We want to get back to the grassroots where we, the people, are really in charge. And so when he says, let's give it back to the states, I said to our guest, well, so why do we need to replace? Why isn't it just a straight out, flat up repeal it? Just get rid of it. Let the states take care of it. And she answered, it's not that simple. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. My little heart fluttered. And I recalled that I had just read an article by Daniel Horowitz, our friend at Conservative Review. And here's what he had to say, Anna. He says, so Republicans have finally grown a spine and will fully repeal Obamacare as soon as they take power in January, right? And then he says, like everything else in politics, it's more complicated than that. Oh, my heart sunk. And he says the biggest myth in politics is that the Republican Party wants to repeal Obamacare when, in fact, prominent Republicans support the core federal interventions that make insurance insolvent. And I know this after being a legislator in Nevada, that what makes it so expensive to have insurance in our state is the mandated coverages. We have over 23 in this state. So when you buy your insurance policy in Nevada, which you have to because we can't go across state lines, you are now paying for Viagra coverage, you're paying for maternity leave, you're paying for all kinds of coverages that you don't need. What we really need to do is just what we do with our cars. We get a basic personal liability and personal liability and property damage insurance. And then if we need to add things to it to protect our cars, comprehensive things like that, we do. But we just get that basic policy, which is actually fairly inexpensive. Everybody can afford it. We've mandated in the state that you have to have insurance on your car. Everybody can afford it. And we go from there and add coverages. Now, that's what we should be doing with our insurance. Not only that, our car insurance, we can go out on the wide world in the internet and buy it from any company we want across state lines. We just get the best deal. And that's the way we should be able to do it with our insurance for our health as well. But that's not how it is. And because of these mandated coverages at the state level, there is no way that we can have affordable health coverage until they get rid of that. And it's those thousands of pages of regulations barring insurers from tailoring those plans for different people in different circumstances, which has tripled the premium. So what's going on is something that has to be dismantled, but they're not even talking about dismantling the core problem. And it isn't the insurance companies. It is actually happening in the state legislatures, and that's why we at the grassroots now have to raise our voice and say to our state legislators, get rid of those mandates here in the state. Let us go across state lines to pick it up like we do our car insurance, and absolutely just repeal Obamacare. Just take it out. There's no replacement necessary. And if we don't do a full repeal, oh my goodness, it looks frightening to me. He says the problem with this plan, this is Daniel Horowitz again, the problem with this plan is that leaving the coverage mandates is not akin to partial repeal. It's tantamount to zero repeal. And already we've got Senator Bill Cassidy and Representative Pete Sessions saying they're working on their replacement plan, which would essentially replace Obamacare with Obamacare. My heart is aflutter, Anna.
I'm disappointed to hear. Yeah, I'm disappointed to hear all of this because Obamacare has been a central issue for me as well. Many would remember living in the state of New Jersey that I ran against Frank Pallone, who claimed that he wrote the Obamacare bill, which I do think was a bit of an exaggeration, but he claimed ownership of that and that he was proud of that. And so we made that central to our campaign. And my quote was, God help the bureaucrat, the government bureaucrat, who gets between me and my family because I'm a daughter, a mother, and a wife. It's my job to take care of my family. And I want to see that they have the correct choices when it comes to treatment and their doctors when it comes to health care. And the government is no good at making those choices. Right now we have Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which is anything but affordable, and the choices are diminishing. Insurance premiums are off the charts. We've talked about this. And Donald Trump ran on the statement that he would repeal it when he was elected. And we need to hold his feet to the fire and those members of his cabinet's feet to the fire. But we also need to be clear to our representatives in the legislature that we do not want a federal replacement to that law in any form. We don't.
That's right.
We want the free market opportunity to cross state lines in the United States, obtain insurance from a provider of our choosing. We want competition, like in this industry as we would in any other industry. This is the time where this is where the rubber meets the road, people. And if we, the people, are really going to direct our government, Sharon, we've got to make sure that we stand up right now in the wake of that interview yesterday, and that we make it clear to our representatives, we don't want a replacement. We do want repeal. We don't want a replacement. We want this back in the hands of we the people, and we the people demand the opportunity to get a policy of our choosing from a provider of our choosing, and that we want it across state lines so that we can compete, and that it's not going to be dictated by state government either. It's going to be a consumer-based industry just like every other industry should be. That's my opinion.
And that's my opinion as well. And Daniel Horowitz concludes with this, which I think is really the seminal statement of this article that he wrote. He said, Republicans will make endless excuses for not repealing the meat and potatoes of this law. And he said, but I'd like to draw your attention to an important memo drafted by Heritage Action. And here is the solution. There is no reason for Senate procedures or Senate parliamentarian to stand in the way of a simple one-sentence, non-severable bill repealing Obamacare with 51 votes using budget reconciliation. So they could do it now. They could do it with this. You know, they're right now talking about reconciling the budget. They're talking about how it's the Democrats this time that are going to be holding the budget hostage. If they don't pass it, we'll go into some kind of being able to pay for government. Right now, that's what they're doing, and they haven't recessed for Christmas for their winter break yet because of this. Well, right now, they only need 51 votes. It's not the 60. It's just 51 straight up majority rules to put this into budget reconciliation. And what he says is a simple one-sentence, non-severable bill saying repeal Obamacare. Repeal Obamacare. And that's really where we have to hold our feet to the fire. Get it out of the federal government's hands. Get it back to the states where we can then go and lobby our state legislators and say, give us what we need, which is a simple insurance plan with no mandates for coverage, and where we can go across state lines and pick what we need.
Absolutely, Sharon, and that is where we leave it as we go to a hard break, and we'll return with our first guest after that break. We are coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. Those are all .coms. I'm Anna Little, co-hosting today with Sharon Engel, Silent John Forsythe on the boards in the studio. We'll all be right back after this break.
This is Rick Trader, host of the Conservative Commandos radio show.
And I'm John Forsythe, owner of WNJC Radio. Fellow patriots, the Conservative Commandos radio show is for conservatives, about conservatives, and by conservatives.
We are patriots who want to take our country back from the likes of Barack Obama, Harry Reid, George Soros, and Nancy Pelosi.
But we can't keep up this fight without your critical support today. Can you help? Please go to www.helpccrs.com right now and make a donation by credit card or PayPal. That's www.helpccrs.com.
Our goal is to expose the liberal agenda and distortions. We are fighting to spread the truth about political issues, political leaders, and conservative issues and values.
Our hosts are not paid. In fact, we buy our own airtime, studio time, and pay our own expenses.
We created the show because we are trying to make a difference. So can you help the CCRS expose the truth in 2014 and beyond? Go to www.helpccrs.com.
Help keep the Conservative Commandos radio show on the air by going to www.helpccrs.com and make a donation today to return our country to the conservative roots created by our founding fathers.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote in mass to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired, as I am, about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back to all of you listening today. I have to laugh. Yesterday, George said, welcome back to all of us fellow deplorables. Anyway, if you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com, or at noontime, log on to roarradio.net. At 11 p.m., log on to highplainsdailynews.com, and now you can listen to Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. And Anna, our first guest is ready, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce F. Vincent Vernuccio, who's the Director of Labor Policy at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He's also a Senior Fellow at the Illinois Policy Institute. He has published articles and on op-eds in such newspapers and magazines as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Investors Business Daily, the Washington Times, National Review, Forbes, and the American Spectator. And he's a frequent contributor on national television and radio shows such as Your World with Neil Cavuto and Varney and Company. In fact, Vincent Vernuccio has been described by Stuart Varney as a top union watchdog. Welcome to Conservative Commando's radio show, Vincent Vernuccio.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we want to start out by just having you tell us a little bit about why Stuart Varney would call you the top union watchdog.
Well, that was several years ago. I do a lot of work, protecting workers, protecting worker freedom, and also trying to make unions better, trying to get them to develop a more free market, conservative business model, give up the compulsion, the training wheels that are holding them back, the crutches that are holding them back under federal labor law, and have them act more like professional service organizations. And we also keep an eye out for where they're abusing workers, where they're fighting worker freedom, and where they're basically not representing their membership.
Well, so you're not actually advocating against unions. You're not saying we should get rid of them altogether.
Well, what we're saying is that unions, if they act like professional service organizations, if they get rid of the those crutches that are holding them back by federal labor law, that one-size-fits-all collective bargaining, where they can force workers to pay them, where they force employers to negotiate with them, then they can actually thrive, and they can do these things under what are known as members-only agreements, especially in the private sector. Now, of course, that's decades off. What our main focus on right now are things like right to work, where saying that a union can't get a worker fired for not paying them. Just earlier this year, we saw a majority of states give workers this right when West Virginia became the 26th right-to-work states. And I tell you, it's really exciting because we may see up to 3 more right-to-work states in 2017, early 2017 at that.
So describe right-to-work states. How is it different in a right-to-work state than one that is not right-to-work? Why should we, as grassroots activists out here in conservative commando land, why should we be lobbying our state legislators as they go into session this time to become right-to-work states?
Well, because you are conservative, you believe in freedom. And that's all right-to-work is. Right-to-work is about freedom. It's about the freedom of a worker to say, yes, this union is doing a good job representing me, and I want to pay them. Or no, this union is not doing a good job, and I don't want them to take money from my hard-earned paycheck. All right-to-work does is take away a union's ability to get a worker fired for not paying them. That's it. Doesn't affect collective bargaining in any other way. Unions, workers, they can still negotiate with their employers over wages, hours, working conditions, almost anything they could before right to work, they can negotiate for after right to work, except for the union's ability to say, pay us or you're fired. Now, that being said, the impact we see of right to work on states is pretty substantial. I mean, in right to work states, you see lower unemployment, you see higher wage growth. When you factor in cost of living, you see workers actually making more. You see higher population growth. You see businesses being more attracted to these right to work states and more jobs come into the right to work states. So from an economic point of view, right to work attracts these job creators. But all of that's secondary. Primary reason to support right to work is because it's about freedom.
So if we were going to talk liberal lingo, we should say this is the ultimate right to choose. This is your freedom of choice. Is that correct?
Well, liberals like the right to choose in very, very limited areas. But yes, this is the freedom to choose. It's to choose whether or not to pay a union. If they're doing a good job, they'll get that support. And if they're not, well, then it should be the worker's right to say you're not doing a good job and I don't want to pay you.
I'm glad that you qualified that the liberal left only has the right to choose in one area, and that seems to be whether you have the right to life or not. All the rest, they want to pretty well regulate your choices, and this is one of those in the area of your right to work. Now, when we start talking about it, you said there were 3 other states that you're working on. So talk to us about the 3 states where you think they might come on board, so that our listeners in those states can say, okay, I'm going to go to my legislature and start lobbying for this.
Well, on election night, Republicans picked up trifectas in 3 states that could that could pass and governor sign right to work really before March of 2017. And those states are Missouri, Kentucky, and possibly even New Hampshire, could be the next 3 right-to-work states in the country. And it could happen quickly. It could happen before the, pretty much by spring of 2017.
This is exciting. This is exciting, Vincent. Before we go to break, I want you to give our listeners just a brief overview of how you would like them to lobby. What are some of the words they should use with their legislators?
Well, we're a nonprofit, so I can't urge anyone to, go out and do what you're talking about, but I can talk about what the benefits are of right to work. And, right to work simply means that a union can't get a worker fired for not paying them. For legislators, though, when you look at the legislators, the brave elected officials that voted for labor reform in the last few states, I'm talking about Wisconsin with Governor Scott Walker, in Michigan, in Indiana, and even in Missouri, they passed it, the governor vetoed it, but the legislature still passed it, and in West Virginia, all of those legislators, they were rewarded when it came to re-election. The unions made a lot of noise saying, we're going to take you out. But at the end of the day, even in Michigan, the birthplace of the UAW had the 5th highest union membership rate, long considered a labor stronghold. Not a single legislator who voted for right to work lost to the general election. And that is powerful.
It really is. Having been a state legislator and having had to run for election, I know how powerful those issues are when you touch the heart of a grassroots person. I know that Anna Little has a lot of questions for you on the other side of the break. Can you stay through with us?
I sure can. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Vincent. We're talking with Vincent Vernuccio about unions, and we'll be right back with you. We're coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. We'll be right back after this short break with Sharon Engel, yours truly, Anna Little, and our special guest, Vincent Vernuccio.
They say I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the Internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote en masse to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos radio show with Sharon Engel and Anna Little. If you would like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, CCRS Network, and CCRShow.com, or at noon, RoarRadio.net, and at 11 p.m., HighPlainsDailyNews.com. And now you can listen to the Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. I'm Anna Little, co-hosting today with Sharon Engel, and we are speaking this segment with Vincent Vernuccio, Director of Labor Policy at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Vincent, thank you so much for waiting through that break. We do appreciate your time.
Hey, sure, Sharon. Anna, thank you again for having me on.
Well, we're really proud of the work that you do, and we're grateful to you for taking some time here with Conservative Commandos. I've been listening to the segments, or the half segment that you were speaking with Sharon, and I've got a question for you. After campaigning in New Jersey, I'm doing a lot of grassroots campaigning in New Jersey, I found that at the grassroots, we have some pretty conservative labor positions door to door. And yet, we are a forced union state, and we lean liberal with the leadership, not only of the unions, but in our legislature as well. Do you believe there may be a disconnect between the union workers and the union leadership in this day and age?
Oh, there absolutely is. And it was never on stage as much, it was never as evident as it was during this last election. You saw the union leadership go in a huge way for Hillary Clinton. Well over 90% of their donations went to Hillary Clinton and people that supported Hillary Clinton. But Donald Trump, in Ohio and several other states, won almost half of the union vote. So you have these union members that are going one way, their leadership almost in lockstep going another way, and there definitely is a disconnect there. And this is why we need things like right to work, and if you want, I'll even tell you about a more exciting new idea that makes right to work even better in a minute. But because workers need to hold their union leadership accountable, it's about giving them the power, and you hear this constant talk of we need to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Well, the union leadership, they're part of that swamp, and it's the union members that need to retake power. And we have to be doing what's in that union members' best interest, and not the union leadership that's taken their forced dues for granted in the non-right-to-work states.
And it sounds like these accomplishments, Vincent, that we've accomplished as we the people, going out of the standard way of choosing a candidate and actually having this presidential election go the way that it did, it gives people hope that their voice really can be heard in politics. Now, I know that the union labor decision-making on who's going to be the leader, the process is a little bit different, and it's a bit watered down, getting from the grassroots up to the leadership. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is that an area where you have some expertise?
Well, yeah, let's talk about some of the new and innovative ideas. I mean, your listeners are probably familiar. If they didn't know the specifics of right to work, they've probably at least heard of it. But there are some new ideas that give even more power to employees and to workers. So if you permit me, let's chat about that for a little bit of time. If you want to talk about keeping union leadership really accountable, there's a movement that's spreading the country right now. It's called worker voting rights or union recertification. And just like we voted for president, just like we vote for Congress, just like we vote for state legislators and governors, we should have the right, or union members should have the right, to reelect what unions represent them in the work. Now, they can vote for union officers, but a lot of times that's a fait accompli. There's a preferred slate, and you really don't have that much of a voice. What workers' voting rights does, and this is primarily for government unions at the state level, is it simply says that, every 1, 2, 3, 4 years, union members and people that the union represents should be able to say, okay, this union is doing a good job, let's keep them representing us, or they're not, and let's find either a different union, somebody new, or go with no union. So we think workers should have the right to reelect or not their union. That's workers' voting rights. Second concept is a new concept that would come up at the Macintosh Center. It's called workers' choice. And remember, when I was talking about right to work, I said it simply means the union can't get a worker fired for not paying them. Now, it doesn't affect collective bargaining in any other way, which also means that if the union is the one union at a workplace, they represent everybody. And even those workers that opt out of paying the union under right to work, they're still stuck with union representation whether they want it or not. Now, unions complain they're stuck representing these people not paying them. They derogatively call them free riders. I like to call them, they're actually forced riders because they're forced to accept union representation whether they want it or not. Workers' choice simply says, you don't want to pay the union, you can represent yourself. You can fully opt out of union representation, and just like almost 87% of workers in the economy that don't have a union, you can go to your boss and say, this is the salary I want to make, these are the benefits I want, and these are the working conditions that I want. Now, the employer can say, yeah, you're a great employee, I am going to negotiate with you, and I will give you these things because I want to keep this top talent, or not, and they're under no obligation. So workers' choice makes negotiating, even under a union contract, more free and fair for everyone. Gives workers the ability to say no thanks to unwanted representation, and unions the ability to say goodbye to workers not paying them.
I think that sounds wonderful, and it also gives the voice to the worker again. I mean, a lot of these workers that are in forced union states like New Jersey, and when I say forced, I mean you don't have a choice in certain industry but to be part of a union. That's what you're working toward changing state by state. But workers get the idea that there's very little they can do, that they have to work for quote-unquote the man, and that they receive their check, and that they should be happy with whatever amount that check is because they really don't have anything to do with it. And it makes them susceptible to a lot of what union would put forward as talking points, such as raising that minimum wage. What has happened is we have a struggling economy, coast to coast, north to south in this country, and it's also evident on the world stage. And we've gotten to such a point where Americans who are an intelligent and educated workforce are getting it. They're saying, wait a minute, these unions are heavy-handed. In some cases, they can put an employer out of business, and then we have no job. And, I did have an experience in the public sector with a police department that the younger folks had the leadership, or I guess the numbers in their PBA. They actually went away from their attorney and negotiated directly with me as the mayor, and we saved their jobs in my town because that's where it was going. This happens in private industry, too. Talk to us, Vincent, about that sentiment and how it might very well fuel and propel the work that you're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. We're here to empower workers and employees and even union members and give them what fits them best. So with workers' choice, if they want to stay in the union, if they want to be under that collective bargaining agreement and pay the union, they have the power to do so. But the problem is, exactly like you were talking about, and I'm so glad you were able to reach an understanding, but a lot of times there isn't that understanding there, especially with younger workers. And younger workers are seeing these collective bargaining agreements as one-size-fits-all. The only way that they can get ahead under a lot of collective bargaining agreements is by logging another year on the job. Doesn't matter how hard they work. Doesn't matter how much they produce. Doesn't matter how much value they are to their employer. You're under this one-size-fits-all union contract. The only way you get ahead is by what's known as seniority, so logging another year on the job. We want unions to embrace things like merit pay, so you work harder, you get paid more. And until they do that, we want things like workers' choice, so a worker can say, well, listen, I am working really hard here. I want to go to my employer and negotiate a better salary. So we want workers' choice so they can opt out of that collective bargaining agreement and be able to work directly with their employer and get paid more for how hard they work. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's all about empowerment. It's all about focusing on the individual and doing what's best for him or her, not what's focused on union leadership or one-size-fits-all collective bargaining. That's the way of the past. We want to push them into the future.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that with the success with workers' choice, that you'd be able to then have a response by union leadership to want to keep those members in the union and therefore adjust based on what those members' desires are rather than dictating to them. And I think that would be a terrific result.
That's right. Listen, if the union is doing a good job and they want to say, well, you're not going to get our services if you're not paying us, then it gives them a great incentive to work harder, to earn those dues, and for those employees to stay in and to pay that good union. The problem is if the union isn't listening to its membership, if it isn't catering to those needs, that right now there's very, very few recourses those workers could have. They could have a very lengthy and arduous and hard and, sometimes nearly impossible decertification campaign that most of the time is extremely difficult to go through. So that's why we need things like recertification, where if the union is doing a good job, they can get recertified, and if they're not, well, workers can look elsewhere. So once again, we're focused on empowering those individual workers, looking out for their best interests, and doing what's best for them as individuals, but not the one-size-fits-all way of the past.
Terrific, Vincent. I want to thank you so much for taking this time with us today on Conservative Commandos. Just remind our listeners where they can follow your work.
Sure. It's all at Mackinac.org, MACKINAC.org. That's right. In the Midwest, we do things a little weird up here, so it's MACKINAC.org, pronounced Mackinac, though.
Thank you so very much, Vincent. Vincent Vernuccio, Director of Labor Policy at Mackinac Center for Public Policy. And I want to have you coming back and see us again soon. Will you please?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, have a great day. Listeners, we are going to have to take another hard break. We are coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. They're all .com. I'm Anna Little, co-hosting today with Sharon Engel. We'll be right back after this break with our next guest.
They say I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
This is Rick Trader, host of the Conservative Commandos radio show.
And I'm John Forsyth, owner of WNJC Radio. Fellow patriots, the Conservative Commandos radio show is for conservatives, about conservatives, and by conservatives.
We are patriots who want to take our country back from the likes of Barack Obama, Harry Reid, George Soros, and Nancy Pelosi.
But we can't keep up this fight without your critical support today. Can you help? Please go to www.helpccrs.com right now and make a donation by credit card or PayPal. That's www.helpccrs.com.
Our goal is to expose the liberal agenda and distortions. We are fighting to spread the truth about political issues, political leaders, and conservative issues and values.
Our hosts are not paid. In fact, we buy our own airtime, studio time, and pay our own expenses.
We created the show because we are trying to make a difference. So can you help the CCRS expose the truth in 2014 and beyond? Go to www.helpccrs.com.
Help keep the Conservative Commandos radio show on the air by going to www.helpccrs.com and make a donation today to return our country to the conservative roots created by our founding fathers.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote en masse to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired, as I am, about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
You are listening to Conservative Commandos radio show, and we're welcoming you back, all you conservative commandos that listen every day, to get the education you need to do the grassroots activism that's required to keep our country free. If you'd like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com and ccrshow.com. At noon, you can log on to roarradio.net. At 11 p.m., you can log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And now you can listen to Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. We're here with you today. Anna Little, my co-host. This is Sharon Engel. And Anna, our next guest is ready, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Bob McClure, who is president and CEO of the James Madison Institute. And James Madison Institute is a nonpartisan public policy research organization based in Florida and founded in 1987. Dr. McClure was appointed by Governor Jeb Bush to the Florida Elections Commission and has served on the State of Florida Education Strategic Planning Council. He has been published in both the state and national level on numerous topics, including property rights, tax policy, health care, and education reform. Lectured nationally on multiple policy issues and has been quoted on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Bob was appointed to the Florida Committee for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and is a member of the editorial board for the Journal of School Choice. Welcome to Conservative Commandos radio show, Dr. Bob McClure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you all today?
Well, we're great, and it's great to have you. And we've asked you to talk to us about a topic that has me a little bit questioning. We thought we knew what to expect from Donald Trump, but you say, how will conservatives really interpret the recent election? How are we interpreting that, and are we interpreting it correctly? Or perhaps is there something going on here that we're not picking up? We just have an expectation.
Well, I have cause to be optimistic. And I'm excited about both at the national level and the state level of what the opportunities are before us. I think that what we saw was a massive vote for change on the part of the American people. As we saw a continued expansive federal government. So I'm very optimistic about where we're heading. I do think sometimes our side, I think it's okay to have singles, doubles, and home runs, but we're not going to get a home run every time. And so, but I'm very optimistic with what I'm seeing at the national level and at the state level as well.
So when we're expecting the repeal of Obamacare, you're optimistic that will happen?
Yes, I am. If you look at the election, you saw what I think was a vote for an identity, the identity of a Donald Trump, and a rejection of big government. Now, I don't know that the American people knew, they know what they don't like. They don't like an expansive federal government, but they don't fully understand what free market, limited government conservatism is, because our side oftentimes doesn't do a great job of telling the story. It's the old adage, facts tell, stories sell. And the left, for years, has said, we're saving the whales, saving the children, and saving the planet. What are you all doing? And we spend 45 seconds talking about regulations and tax policy and those kinds of things, and people's eyes begin to glaze over. And the left says, yeah, but we're saving the whales, the children, and the planet. What are you doing? And then we try it again. And I think what Donald Trump captured was in a soundbite or in a few sentences this notion that expansive government doesn't work, that it is expensive, corrupt, and makes a lot of people's lives miserable, and he's going to change it. Now, they don't know exactly how he's going to change it, but I have some thoughts on that as well. But they knew they liked the messenger, and they wanted somebody to go to Washington and start setting off hand grenades, and I think that's what you're going to see going forward.
Well, certainly we've seen the hand grenades exploding. I think that it's concerning and has been concerning to me that they're using the word replace as well as repeal when they talk about Obamacare. Does that cause you any consternation? I know we talked a bit about it in another segment of this show, how that replacement possibly could get us just Obamacare light rather than the actual repeal and going after the underlying cause of exorbitant costs for health care, which are the mandated coverages. Talk a bit about that.
Well, I think you're going to see, if you look at what Donald Trump has said, he gave a speech about 2 weeks before the election that few people paid attention to because nobody thought he was really going to win. If your listeners just Google Donald Trump Gettysburg Address, you'll see a speech that he gave in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And it looks like it could have been, 80% of it looks like it could have been written by our side, our team. And yet, Donald Trump is not a movement. There's no reason to believe he's a movement conservative, as I'm guessing most of your listeners are. And so in that speech, 80% of it is exactly where we would all be. Tax cuts, school choice, energy policy, all of those different kinds of things, repeal and replace Obamacare, all of that kind of stuff. But there was some of the stuff in there that traditionally gives conservatives heartburn, and that is, infrastructure and some things like that. And so to your question, I fully anticipate a repeal and replace of Obamacare. And so I would anticipate you see something along the lines of HSAs, health savings accounts, buying and selling of insurance across state lines and having a level competitive marketplace, restoring the doctor-patient relationship, transparency in cost, certificate of need, all of these different things that you will see. But, and this goes back to my original point, you may see some of the things like, as you referenced, keeping your child on. There'll be a repeal of the mandate for sure. You must buy insurance, but keeping one's child on insurance, a pre-existing condition, some of those things that are generally by the public, not necessarily conservatives, but by the public, they like a lot more of those things. You're going to have to get some of that with a Donald Trump presidency. But as I told, a lot, as Ronald Reagan used to say, 80% my friend is not 20% my enemy. Now, we must hold them all accountable because you know and I know how Washington is. It's often a lot of talk and a little bit of action. But I think you're going to start to see more action that moves into conservative vein very shortly within the first 100 days.
We have to go to a break. Dr. McClure, can you stay through the break? Because my co-host, Anna Little, has questions for you as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time. And we are coming to you live from Conservative Commando's Radio Network Studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia. And around the world on the Internet, we come to you from American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. We'll be right back with yours truly, Sharon Angle, my co-host, Anna Little, and our special guest, Dr. Bob McClure, who's the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute.
I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote in mass to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos radio show with Sharon Engel and Anna Little. If you would like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, CCRS Network and CCRShow.com, or noon, roarradio.net, and at 11 p.m., highplainsdailynews.com. And now you can listen to the Conservative Commandos from any telephone by calling 832-999-1199. We are so grateful that our current guest, Dr. Bob McClure, President and CEO of the James Madison Institute. We're so grateful he could hang on through that break. We do appreciate your time, Dr. McClure. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're honored to have you, and we're proud of the work that you've been doing. And I just have a couple of questions. I've been listening to your half segment of the interview with Sharon Engel, and I've just been brewing some questions here. You know, Donald Trump was not your run-of-the-mill candidate. I think I'm making an understatement there. And I think we, the people, stood up and said, okay, political parties, we've had enough of you. It's not working for us down here where the money meets the month at our kitchen table. And so we're going to put a guy like Donald Trump in charge, and maybe we don't know exactly where he's going to go, but we can't keep going to the same place you take us. And I think that's wonderful language, and it comes from having an educated and intelligent workforce that says, hey, I've got to do something different because what matters is what happens in my home. So here's my question to you. We've got issues like schools and medicine where vouchers have been discussed. I think that gives us the best freedom. Do you think we have a chance of seeing a voucher-based system that will allow Americans to go ahead and get assistance if they're part of the VA and they've been a part of the military and they're veterans and they need medical care, or in the case of education where they've been promised a public education and they want the choice in schools by merit to try to come up with the best education that suits their child? Can we see these voucher programs as a possibility going forward?
I really do. I don't know in the first 100 days or the first 6 months we will get everything that we're hoping for. But if you look at you actually, in your analysis, you're spot on. The American people voted for change, and they knew Donald Trump would bring it. They weren't exactly sure what they were going to get, and that was my point earlier on. You're absolutely right. But they knew they wanted massive change. If you look at the last 5 elections, dating back to when Barack Obama was elected. 4 of the last 5 have been change elections. The American people have been crying out for change for 8 years. And previous to that, when George Bush was elected in 2000, it was a nation at peace, a nation with a strong economy, and yet the American people voted for change and getting rid of Al Gore, bringing in George Bush. So really the last 4 of the last 5 elections have been change elections. The rise of the Tea Party, the rise of the Occupy Wall Street, even though those 2 groups had very different solutions, they were angry about many of the same things: crony capitalism, corruption in Washington, all of those kinds of things. And so you have seen this brewing now for literally a generation. The American people are hungry for change. And so what I think you're going to see and you look at now at the people that Donald Trump has been appointing in the 2 areas that you're speaking of, particularly health care, 3 areas, Veterans Administration they're looking at, and then, of course, education. These people, Tom Price at HHS, is the architect of repeal and replace. He's the architect of using the market to advance health care and improve quality, to lower costs, and to restore the doctor-patient relationship. Betsy DeVos has been a pioneer on educational reform and choice and accountability in vouchers. Now, having said that, Betsy DeVos was a Common Core supporter, not a federal government intrusion supporter, but she believed in standardized testing. But you know what? When you go to work for your boss, you do what your boss tells you to do. And I believe that Betsy DeVos is going to be the kind of Secretary of Education that's going to carry out what Donald Trump wants, and that is the utter and complete rejection of Common Core. On many of the other issues in choice in education, she's a terrific choice. Tom Price is a terrific choice. And so you really are seeing with his appointments a lot of people that are ready to move quickly, decisively, and they don't worry about what the Washington Post or the New York Times has to say. And now with a leader who feels the same way, the opportunities are in front of us to get a lot of really great things done.
Yeah, I'm feeling excitement listening to you because I'm hoping for that. I'm really hoping for that. I want to talk quickly about security and safety because I think that was a huge issue. I mean, you had economics, of course, education and health care, very personal matters. Safety is also a very personal matter. And I think this was a personal election for every voter that walked in the booth. Strong military leaders. We've got, some discussion on the recent pick for Secretary of Defense. Is it possible that by putting strong military leadership in place, maybe we won't need to use them? Is that, an oxymoron, or is that something that might really be so?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Donald Trump has appointed, obviously, Mad Dog and some of his other generals. These are very accomplished soldiers who, contrary to the liberal media, really think they don't. Their first response is not to put our men and women in harm's way. They want to look for other ways to defeat, in this case, ISIS and much of what's going on there. The folks that he's putting in place are just terrific, and you're going to see an aggressive foreign policy, but you're not going to see a foreign policy that is going to try to willy-nilly travel the world and get us into a lot of wars. Donald Trump made it clear he wants to defeat ISIS and he wants to protect America. And so he's appointed men like John F. Kelly as Secretary of Homeland Security. He's obviously appointed, General Michael Flynn for National Security Advisor. So, James Mathis, and then Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor. So he's really done a great job appointing these generals who focus. If you look at their track record, they're terrifically smart. They're great leaders. They have a level of humility, and they really, really are careful about putting our men and women in harm's way. And I think the final component to that is that it sends a message to aggressors, not only to ISIS, which is obviously has to be defeated, but it sends a message to aggressors such as Russia. It's Ronald Reagan's peace through strength, which was to your point at the very beginning. It is peace through strength. And I think that's what you're going to see. I mean, ISIS being on the march, Russia being on the march, is a result of no belief that the American, that America and Barack Obama were ever going to do anything. Remember Barack Obama's bright red line in Syria? Nothing ever happened. And so these despots and bad guys are going to move because they don't respect the strength of America. That's what Donald Trump is trying to restore.
Well, Dr. Bob McClure, I want to thank you very, very much for discussing all of this with us. You have given me hope. I certainly want to be that eternal optimist that I'm accused of being, but you do want to have some study behind it, and I thank you so much for the work you're doing. Would you take a moment as we close out this segment and just tell our listeners where they can follow your work so that they can stay informed as we go forward?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely, and I've thoroughly enjoyed being on the show today and would love to come back. They can learn a lot more at jamesmadison.org, just like the fourth president, jamesmadison.org. We are a Florida-based organization, but given the fact that Florida is so diverse demographically, given the fact that Florida is so important politically, much of what we work on is national in nature. And so your listeners can learn a lot more about what's going on, not only in Florida, but also nationally. Just visit jamesmadison.org.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bob McClure, President and CEO of the James Madison Institute. Come back and see us again soon, will you?
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Listeners, this is Anna Little co-hosting today with Sharon Engel, and we are coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM/FM 24/7. They are all.com. I'm Anna Little. Sharon Engel's on the other line. Silent John Forsythe's on the boards, and we'll all be right back with you and our next guest after this break.
I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
This is Rick Trader, host of the Conservative Commandos radio show.
And I'm John Forsythe, owner of WNJC Radio. Fellow patriots, the Conservative Commandos radio show is for conservatives, about conservatives, and by conservatives.
We are patriots who want to take our country back from the likes of Barack Obama, Harry Reid, George Soros, and Nancy Pelosi.
But we can't keep up this fight without your critical support today. Can you help? Please go to www.helpccrs.com right now and make a donation by credit card or PayPal. That's www.helpccrs.com.
Our goal is to expose the liberal agenda and distortions.
We are fighting to spread the truth about political issues, political leaders, and conservative issues and values.
Our hosts are not paid. In fact, we buy our own airtime, studio time, and pay our own expenses.
We created the show because we are trying to make a difference. So can you help the CCRS expose the truth in 2014 and beyond? Go to www.helpccrs.com.
Help keep the Conservative Commandos radio show on the air by going to www.helpccrs.com and make a donation today to return our country to the conservative roots created by our founding fathers.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote en masse to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired, as I am, about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Conservative Commandos radio show with Anna Little and Sharon Engel. If you would like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, CCRS Network, and CCRShow.com, or at noon, RoarRadio.net, and at 11 p.m., HighPlainsDailyNews.com. And now you can listen to the Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Our next guest is with us, and the honor of the introduction is mine. Larry Sirignano is an attorney and political consultant based in Arlington, Virginia. Larry is presently representing President-elect Donald Trump in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, on the election recount. Attorney Sirignano serves as Virginia State Director at American Catholics for Religious Freedom and a D.C. representative at Choose Life License Plates and FundAdoption.org, but he also has previous involvement with international projects such as Africa Life Youth Foundation and Operation Outcry. He's done election recounts all over the world, including several in the United States. For example, Scott Brown's state Senate run and countless others. Larry often says, "Show me a fight and I'll get in it." Previously, Larry had reported for us last week live from Kenosha County, Wisconsin, but now he's returned to Washington, D.C. just last night. Larry Sirignano, welcome to Conservative Commando's radio show.
Anna, that's a greatly well-rehearsed, well-researched introduction. I thank you. My mother believes it. God rest her soul. But the live action in Wisconsin is almost wrapped up. They yet have to count some of the absentees in Milwaukee and Madison. So far, the numbers have been up and down 1 or 2 votes, typically where an absentee ballot has been found to been filled out wrong, using the wrong pen or something along those lines. And you can discern the voter's intent. We give credit to the voter. And most of those go to Hillary. A lot more Democrats where I was in Kenosha. But in general, absentees tend to favor Republicans, military voters, senior citizens, that type of thing. The demographics are such. But the wrongly filled out ones, nursing homes, different pieces along those lines. There was no voter fraud that was found. There were a couple boxes that hadn't been sealed correctly, but they didn't look like they'd been tampered with. Little things like that. There were no bags of ballots that were being found or anything. So this accounting, and it's really a forensic accounting game of going back and hand counting all the ballots and trying to discern. We had a couple of clerks, municipal clerks, who had to come in and explain what happened on Election Day and make head or tails of it. And a lot of them, as you can imagine, after having done a 14, 15-hour day, at the end of the day, they didn't bother to count the write-ins. And so Evan McMillan went up by about 100 votes just in my precinct, in my county alone. We did see a lot of people who voted for none of the above. Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck voted for themselves. We saw strange combinations like Bernie Sanders and Paul Ryan, either as president and vice president. We saw God and Jesus getting votes. We saw lots of silly things along those lines. A lot of protest vote. A lot of people would fill in as a deliberate overvote so that the machine would kick it out. If you only vote for one person for president, if you vote for 2, the machine kicks it out. And a lot of people voted for everybody but Hillary or everybody but Donald. They filled in all the circles from Gary Johnson all the way down. Interesting enough, in my county of 77,000 votes, there was only one additional vote for Jill Stein. It's pretty expensive for $3.5 million. And there's no change. And the other big news, of course, was Michigan, where after they looked at Detroit and found that over half of the machines couldn't be reconciled with the numbers, and that they were not subject to recount by state law if they couldn't be reconciled after a second try. Hillary was losing more votes than she was going to gain, and nothing again for Jill Stein. So they stopped the entire process. The courts ruled that Jill Stein was not an aggrieved party and that she could not possibly have won, no matter how many problems they found, given that she'd only gotten 1% of the vote. It was not likely that she was going to get 99% of the votes and come back for a win. But the Democrats were just as happy not to have to continue the recount and expose a lot of the problems in the urban areas that we see. None of this does anything about matching where people have voted out of state in Florida, for instance, and voted at home as well. None of it shows whether or not they were actual citizens that were voting, and that's, of course, what President Trump has alleged, that there are a lot of non-citizens voting. None of these processes of counting the ballots that have been cast can tell you that. It's after the fact, once they go into the system. And so there's still an awful lot that has to be looked at. I know that the Democrats are trying to say, well, we can show that there was no fraud, and you really can't from this whole long exercise in futility of doing a recount.
Well, I like your phrase, exercise in futility, because I think most of the public recognized as this recount claim. I mean, obviously the election was conceded by Hillary Clinton, but then the recount claims coming from Jill Stein, the public reaction was, why? We're going to spend time, we're going to spend money, and of course the response then from the Jill Stein camp is, well, we want every single vote to be counted. So now you've got these two arguments facing each other, where a recount perhaps should only be used because of the time and expense, if there's going to be a change or potential change in the outcome, and then this camp that wants to see every vote counted regardless. What are your thoughts on that, having been through the recount process yourself?
Well, having done this many times, if it was close and we were fighting over 100 votes, as we have in many races, you would have gone and fought for every vote in New Hampshire, which was the closest state, where Kelly Ayotte lost the Senate race by, I think, 1,200 votes. And we would have gone back up there to do the recount. But they had let the deadline pass for that. And, of course, Hillary won New Hampshire, so they weren't interested in that being recounted. And there's no question that this is a Hillary-funded campaign. All the operatives from Chicago were coming out throughout. I had over 20 of them come into Wisconsin to help with the recount. Some of them wearing Jill Stein badges and some wearing Hillary Clinton badges. Because in my county, they only allowed 2 people on the actual floor. They had an observation deck, if you will, but only 2 people from each campaign. So if you had 2 from Jill and 2 from Hillary, you could have 4 on. And it was an ongoing campaign. Jill, of course, has raised twice as much money as she did for her entire campaign, has built up a big mailing list. And those are all Hillary people that are interested. A lot of the old-time political operatives that have been through this a number of times and had all worked on ballot integrity or voter efforts in for Hillary. So this is very much what that was about. Certainly we want every vote to count, although I'm not sure we want every person to vote. There was a story about a homeless person who lived under a bridge that came in to vote, and he didn't actually have an address. He had a Social Security card, but didn't actually have an address. But everybody knew him, and they gave him a provisional ballot and let him vote. In Wisconsin, you have 24 hours to come back to correct that if you don't have the right ID. And, of course, he didn't. So he didn't vote. But there were others. They have a couple of interesting provisions in Wisconsin. If an absentee ballot is overcounted, where we have envelopes that aren't right, once the envelope's been opened and the ballot's put in, there's really no way to know what number, who that person voted for. So we basically take all the votes, turn them upside down, mix them up, and the clerk picks out one and throws that one out. It depends on, luck of the draw as to who you're going to lose.
Oh,
they do it that way
That's
to try and dissuade people from stuffing the ballot box, but because it could be that there would have been Hillary Clinton votes lost or Donald Trump votes that were lost. So they don't want anybody doing that. They also allow people to print out from email a ballot and mail it in. And some of the, especially military overseas ballots, were done that way. And then there's a clerk that would take a look and match them, fill out an official ballot, and do it as they had done it. And then, of course, you have to check that. There's a lot of room for human error. But every vote counts. Every vote should be counted. And the fact that the numbers go up or down, anybody who ever had to count money at church or balance anything understands that you can be off by one. That doesn't mean you're only off by one. You could be off by 10. But until it actually balances, you don't know where the mistakes are. And so that's an important piece.
Yep. We've got
and we did that.
Break. Can you hold on for 2 minutes? Because I know Sharon Engel's been listening on the other line, and she's got some questions for you, too.
That's great.
Okay. So, listeners, we are coming to you live from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios, WNJC 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the Internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, and AM FM 24/7. Those are all .coms. I'm Anna Little, co-hosting today with Sharon Engel. We're speaking this segment with Larry Sirignano, who is most recently the attorney representing President-elect Donald Trump in Wisconsin on the election recount. We'll all be right back after this break.
Yeah, that's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the Internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
This is Pastor Christina Lamanier, chaplain for the INRA.
And I'm her husband, J.D. Manier. We help co-host on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and we want to sincerely thank our listeners who turned out to vote in mass to elect Donald Trump, Governor Mike Pence, and conservative congressional candidates across our nation.
Against incredible odds, you helped create the strongest GOP team to take the reins of power in Washington since the 1920s. General George Patton said, "It's the unconquerable soul of man, not the nature of the weapon he uses, that ensures victory." We salute all of you for taking a stand for truth, freedom, and defending our constitutional form of government. Let us continue to pray for our nation and for God's blessings. May God save the United States of America.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
This is Conservative Commandos radio show. You're listening to Sharon Engel and Anna Little, co-host of the show today. And we've been talking with our special guest, Larry Sirignano. And if you would like to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, please check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrshow.com, or at noon, log on to roarradio.net. At 11 p.m., log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And now you can listen to the Conservative Commandos from any phone by calling 832-999-1199. Larry, I have been listening to you and Anna talk a lot about this election recount process and every vote counting, which, of course, is what every American really does want. But I was especially interested in what you had to say about Jill Stein not being the real deal. She's not the one behind this recount. You said that Hillary was behind this recount. And yet we're told by the news that Jill Stein raised $6 million for this recount. So she has more than enough money to pay for it. Tell us a little bit more, dig into that just a little more for me so that we and our listeners can really understand why it's Hillary and not Jill Stein.
Well, it's pretty clear that Jill Stein and her old year-long campaign raised less than $3 million and has raised over almost $7 million for the recount. That doesn't happen unless she's getting a lot of people who didn't give her money before, and they are Hillary people. And I can testify, and others will, that there were lots of Democratic political operatives who worked for Hillary that showed up and were at polling places and were at the recount offices wherever they were. And we were at a job center in Kenosha County. They were literally in a boiler room in Milwaukee. The good news is it was warm and dry. The bad news is it was noisy. The lawyers that had worked for Hillary there to represent Hillary were all over the state. And they were using it as a learning and training process on how to do a recount and what to look for, and especially with the provisional and military and absentee ballots and how that process works. Some states, you might know that unless the margin of error is close, they don't even bother to count the absentees. And yet in other states, like Florida, over half the people are voting early and by absentee. The other piece of the process that we really have no way to confirm or deny are all the people that registered on the same day in Wisconsin. And again, they're supposed to show 2 pieces of ID, but there's no verification of that except that the clerk certifies that they saw it. And we know on many occasions they didn't have it. We don't know whether those people had voted in another state or another county. There have been some prosecutions for that, but again, it's like everything, subject to clerical error. If the information doesn't go in right, it's not going to be found and not going to be caught.
So when you say there have been some prosecutions for that, what do they prosecute? What's the charge? Is it election?
Well, there was a wife who voted for her dead husband, and they went after her, surprisingly. But there have been a lot of cases that have been presented to prosecutors, and typically it's just not worth their time and effort to prosecute people who voted their vacation homes and also voted at their regular address, or people who vote absentee and then also show up at the polls. Now, what's interesting, another thing in Wisconsin is if you vote absentee, they mark your envelope and your ballot with a number so it can be found, because your ballot doesn't actually count until Election Day. If you die before Election Day, your vote does not get counted, even though you had voted up to a month earlier. They all go into the pool, and if that happens, they can go in and pull those ballots out. So it's an interesting process, and it varies state to state. Michigan had other issues going on, and nobody, I don't think, has ever really closely looked at what's going on in Detroit. I expect after what they've seen, we will see some significant changes to the legislation covering elections in Michigan.
Well, I know that this is such an interesting topic for me because I do want every vote to count. And I know that Anna's got one last question for you because we're just at the end, Larry.
That's fine.
Time flies when you're having fun, right, Sharon? So
it does.
I can give long answers so you don't have to talk too much.
Yeah. Well, Larry, I just wanted to ask you a final question. Was it worth it? Was this recount in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, worth it from your perspective?
Well, the county paid for 20 people who made a lot of Christmas money. They worked 7 days, 10-hour days, and they were made $15 an hour. We had one fellow who wanted to do it and did it gratis, but then they had to feed everybody, and they had to pay security sheriff's officers to be with the ballots 24 hours. They had to pay for a corporate counsel to be there in case there were any legal questions. It's a huge expense. Jill Stein paid most of that, but not all. And then she certainly didn't pay for all the other people. There were 72 Republican lawyers that came in from around the country, and all of our travel expenses and hotel and whatnot had to be paid for by the Republicans or by ourselves. And it doesn't help one way or the other with the process. Again, the numbers for Jill Stein, she got one vote out of the entire process for the election, and it was an absentee ballot that hadn't been marked correctly. So,
well, that's just amazing. I want to thank you for stepping up and being part of that process. We certainly need representation, and our President-elect Donald Trump needed your representation, so thank you for that. Is there someplace you want people to plug in and follow you? I know you're on Facebook. How else do you communicate?
Oh, look at the Republican National Lawyers Association. I am happy to report, Anna, that Wisconsin is the 31st state to get the Choose Life license plates. I represent the Choose Life license plates in D.C., and by coincidence, yesterday was the first day that people will be able to get apply for license plates in Wisconsin. And that'll be the 31st state where the money will go towards promoting adoption at crisis pregnancy centers across the state.
Well, we have got to fly because John Forsythe Jr. is telling me 30 seconds, and I got to thank the rest of the guests. So, Larry, thank you so much. Come back and see us again soon. So, listeners, that was Larry Sirignano, attorney and political consultant, most recently representing President-elect Trump in the recount. We want to thank him for his time. We want to thank our first guest, who was Frank Vernuccio's son, Vincent Vernuccio, who was with us at 3:35, and then Dr. McClure of the James Madison Institute. That was our 4:05. And Sharon Engel, I want to thank you for co-hosting with me today. John Forsythe, we wouldn't have a show without you. Any parting words as we go out?
Great show again, Anna. Thank you. Looking forward to next Friday.
Of course. Gotta run, gotta go. Take care. God bless. See you next week on the radio.
This is President Barack Obama. When I'm in Arkansas, which is about, I don't know, never. I almost always